Welcome to a story of betrayal, survival, and ultimate justice. A CEO husband's sudden thoughtful gesture, a lovingly prepared breakfast for his wife, takes a dark turn. But when his wife, suffering from severe morning sickness, gives the meal to his personal secretary, a horrifying chain of events is set in motion. An hour later, a blood-curdling scream echoes from the main office. When I ran in to see what happened, the scene before me was one of utter horror. That morning, I arrived at the office early as usual. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the thick stacks of files on my desk. I had just sat down, intending to review a few quarterly reports, when my office door swung open. My husband, David, walked in, carrying a high-end thermos, a sleek, stainless steel model I'd never seen in our kitchen. Even more surprising was the radiant smile on his face, a warm and affectionate expression I hadn't seen in a very long time. He placed the thermos on my desk, his voice gentle. "Good morning, Eleanor. Happy 3-year anniversary. I wanted to do something special for you." I stared at him, then down at the thermos, completely stunned. David, the man who was perpetually consumed by meetings and endless business trips, had personally prepared breakfast for his wife? He opened the lid, explaining with a tender tone, "I've noticed you've been looking pale lately, and work has been so stressful. I woke up early this morning to make your favorite homemade heirloom tomato soup, the one from that little Italian place we love. I wanted to make sure you were eating well. Eat it while it's hot." A cloud of steam rose, carrying the rich, aromatic scent of roasted tomatoes and basil. If this had been me 6 months ago, I might have been moved to tears by this rare gesture of affection. But now, ironically, that very smell became a source of absolute dread. I was secretly 3 months pregnant, and the morning sickness had been tormenting me relentlessly. The slightest potent smell sent waves of nausea through me, my stomach churning violently. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Thank you, David. That's so thoughtful. But I already had a bagel at home this morning. I'm still completely full." A flicker of surprise crossed David's face. The smile on his lips stiffened for a second before he quickly composed himself. He pushed the thermos closer to me, his voice patient but firm. "A bagel is nothing. Just have a little of the soup to get your strength up. I spent all morning making it. Don't disappoint me." His words were soft, but they carried an invisible pressure. I looked into his eyes, searching for a hint of sincerity, but all I saw was a calculated expectation. Just as I was struggling to find a way to refuse without offending him, a knock on the door saved me. Chloe, the new secretary hired 3 months ago, entered with a stack of documents. She wore a tight-fitting business dress that showcased her curves, her face meticulously made up, exuding an air of flirtatious ambition. She placed the documents down, her eyes darting from David to the thermos of soup on my desk. Her voice, dripping with sweetness, rang out, "Oh, Mr. Sterling, you're so thoughtful. Bringing a special breakfast for Eleanor first thing in the morning. She's the luckiest woman in the world, having a perfect 10 husband like you." David ignored her, simply gave me a final look, and walked out of the room. At that moment, an idea sparked in my mind. I smiled, gently pushing the thermos toward her. I just ate, and it would be a shame to waste David's effort. "Chloe, have you had breakfast yet? If not, please have this. His tomato soup is amazing, and it's still perfectly hot." Chloe's eyes widened in surprise, then shifted to a look of glee, as if she had struck gold. She glanced toward the door, saw that David hadn't objected but was standing silently with a slightly annoyed expression, and eagerly took the thermos. "Well, if you insist," she cooed, her voice flirtatious. "Thank you, Eleanor. I'll eat every last drop. Anything the CEO makes must be a taste of heaven." I watched Chloe walk out of my office, clutching the thermos like a precious treasure. A wave of relief washed over me as the threat of nausea subsided. I tried to focus on my work, flipping through financial reports, but the numbers danced before my eyes, my head spinning. A growing sense of unease settled in my heart, like the heavy, oppressive air before a thunderstorm. I poured myself a glass of warm water, taking small sips to soothe the baby stirring inside me. After 3 years of waiting, heaven had finally blessed me with this tiny life. I promised myself I had to stay healthy and not let any negative thoughts affect my child. About an hour later, as I was typing away, a loud crash echoed from the open office area outside, like something heavy had fallen to the floor. It was immediately followed by a piercing scream that tore through the quiet of the entire floor. It wasn't a normal cry of fear. It was a sound of absolute, gut-wrenching agony. It was shrill and terrifying. My heart stopped, a terrible premonition washing over me. I shot up from my chair and rushed out of the room. The scene before me made me freeze in place. Chloe was writhing on the floor next to her desk. The thermos lay overturned, its contents spilled everywhere. The rich smell of tomato was now mixed with the acrid stench of vomit, creating a sickening odor. She was clutching her lower abdomen, her beautiful face now contorted and deathly pale. Her eyes were rolled back in pain, white foam bubbling at the corners of her mouth as her body convulsed violently like an epileptic seizure. But the most horrifying sight was the large, dark red stain spreading across the lower part of her beige dress. Blood. Fresh blood was pouring out of her, soaking the carpet beneath her. Employees scrambled around her, their shouts and cries for an ambulance creating a chaotic scene. I stood there, my limbs trembling, a bitter taste in my throat. What was happening? Why was Chloe in this state? That was the soup I had just given her. The thought shot through my mind like a bolt of ice. Just then, the door to the CEO's office burst open. David rushed out, his face a mask of unprecedented panic. He didn't run to his employee's side or ask what had happened. He stopped dead a few feet away, his eyes wide, staring at the pool of blood on the floor. I saw the expression on his face shift from shock to terror, and finally, to an unbridled, furious rage. He snapped his head up, his eyes locking onto mine, sharp and cold as daggers. It wasn't the look of a husband worried for his wife after seeing a gruesome scene, nor the look of a boss concerned for his employee. It was the look of a predator, of a murderer who had just watched his prey narrowly escape. He strode toward me, his hand clamping down on my arm with bruising force. "You!" he hissed through clenched teeth, his voice trembling with suppressed fury. "What did you do? Why? Why was it her?" The absurd, accusatory question was like a slap in the face, jolting me to my senses. Why was he asking what I did? Why was he devastated that the person lying on the floor was Chloe and not me? I looked deep into his bloodshot eyes, a horrifying truth beginning to unravel. I wrenched my arm from his grasp, struggling to keep my voice steady and cold. "What did I do? I just gave her the soup you made." "What are you thinking, David? Were you hoping the person lying there would be me?" David froze, as if realizing his mistake. He let go of my arm, took a step back, and ran a hand over his face to hide his confusion and panic. The wail of an ambulance siren grew louder from the street below, shattering the suffocating tension between us. Paramedics rushed in, carefully placing Chloe onto a stretcher and wheeling her away. David hurried after them, but before he stepped into the elevator, he turned back to look at me, his eyes still filled with hatred and a silent threat. "You're coming to the hospital too," he commanded. "This happened because of the soup you gave her. Don't even think about running from your responsibility." I watched the elevator doors close, swallowing the tears that threatened to fall. The husband I had once loved and trusted completely had revealed his true colors, a cold, calculating monster. That tomato soup, if I hadn't given it to Chloe because of my morning sickness, the person lying in that pool of blood would have been me, and my precious unborn child would have shared that tragic fate. A brutal reality began to dawn. David didn't want to nourish me. He wanted to kill our child. Or perhaps even me. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. I would go to the hospital, not because I was afraid of his threats, but because I needed to witness, with my own eyes, the complete unmasking of this man. Sitting on a cold bench in the sterile hospital corridor, I clasped my hands together to stop them from shaking. The bright fluorescent lights overhead reflected off the polished linoleum floor, creating a sense of desolate loneliness. David, the man I had shared a bed with for 3 years, was pacing anxiously in front of the emergency room doors like a caged animal. He ran his hands through his hair, occasionally glancing at me with a look that was both scrutinizing and hateful, but he didn't dare come near. Seeing his once immaculate suit now wrinkled and disheveled, I felt a pang of bitterness for myself. What was he so worried about, the life of his young mistress, or the fear that some dark secret was about to be exposed? Finally, the emergency room doors swung open, breaking the suffocating silence. A middle-aged doctor stepped out, pulling down his surgical mask to reveal a tired, grim face. David rushed forward, his voice strained with anxiety. "Doctor, how is she? Is it serious?" I slowly stood up and walked closer, trying to keep my breathing even. The doctor looked at both of us, his gaze lingering on David for a moment before he spoke. The patient suffered from acute poisoning. Fortunately, she was brought in just in time and is now out of immediate danger. However, the severe hemorrhaging was caused by the ingestion of a large amount of misoprostol. The unfamiliar drug name made me frown, but for David, it was like a physical blow. The color drained from his face, his lips moved, but no words came out. The doctor continued, his tone becoming sharper. "This is a drug commonly used to induce uterine contractions, either for childbirth or to terminate a pregnancy. Given the massive dose found in her stomach contents, this was clearly a deliberate poisoning, not a case of simple food poisoning. Per hospital protocol, we've already notified the police." Just as he finished speaking, 2 uniformed police officers appeared at the end of the hallway. They approached us, their expressions serious, and requested our cooperation in their investigation. David seemed to snap out of his stupor. He quickly wiped the sweat from his forehead, trying to regain the composed demeanor of a CEO. He turned and pointed a trembling finger at me. "Officers, you must investigate this thoroughly. This morning, I made soup for my wife. She had the thermos in her office for a long time before giving it to Chloe. I suspect that my wife, out of some baseless jealousy, put something in it." I looked at David, my heart clenching as if squeezed by an iron fist. So, he had a script prepared. If I had eaten the soup, I would have lost my baby. If someone else ate it, he would frame me as the poisoner. I took a deep breath, looked directly at the older of the 2 officers, and said calmly, "I have no motive to do such a thing. You can check the hallway security cameras and test for fingerprints on any vial if you find one. More importantly, I want to know why a soup my husband claimed was to nourish his wife contained an abortion drug, and why his secretary was so violently affected by it." The officer nodded, taking notes, then turned to the doctor and asked a question that made both David and me hold our breath. "Doctor, what is the victim's specific condition? What are the consequences of ingesting this drug?" The doctor sighed, his voice low with regret. "The patient, Miss Chloe, was 6 weeks pregnant. Due to the massive dose of the drug causing violent uterine contractions, we are very sorry to inform you that the fetus could not be saved." The world seemed to freeze. I heard David let out a strangled gasp. His legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the bench. His face was ashen, his eyes wide and vacant, staring into nothingness. So that was it. His beautiful young secretary had been carrying his child, and with his own cruel scheme intended for his wife, he had unwittingly killed his own illegitimate child, a child whose existence he probably hadn't even known about. Looking at my husband's pathetic state, I felt no satisfaction, only a rising wave of disgust. The love he had professed for me, the passion he had for his mistress, it was all worthless in the face of his own selfish, cruel nature. After receiving the shocking information from the doctor, the police decided to separate David and me for individual statements right there at the hospital. I was led to a quieter corner of the hallway, facing the older officer with sharp, calm eyes. He looked at me not with judgment, but with a hint of sympathy. "Ma'am," he began gently, "please recount everything in detail, from the moment you received the thermos of soup until the incident occurred. The more detail, the better. Don't leave anything out, no matter how small." I closed my eyes, replaying the film of that fateful morning in my mind. I described David's sudden, overly attentive appearance, a behavior that had vanished from our marriage for over half a year. I told them about the smell of the soup that made me nauseous, how I had only opened the lid for a moment before closing it again. I emphasized every word. From the moment he placed it on my desk until Chloe walked in, I never left my chair, nor did I open the thermos again. It was in my line of sight the entire time, completely untouched. I only gave it to Chloe because I couldn't eat it and she seemed very eager to have it. On the other side of the hall, David was giving his statement to a younger officer. He deliberately emphasized the pristine nature of his cooking process. I went to the market myself, and I cooked the soup myself first thing in the morning. I'm very particular, so I never let the housekeeper touch my wife's food. After cooking, I put it directly into the thermos and brought it straight to the office. It never left my hands. David was confident this testimony would paint him as a model husband while narrowing the suspect pool to just me, the only person who had been alone with the soup in a closed room. But in his panic, he had overlooked a crucial detail. The more he insisted he was the sole preparer, the more he tightened the noose around his own neck, if the poison was proven to have been in the soup from the beginning. As the questioning paused, the older officer walked over to his colleague. They spoke in hushed tones, occasionally glancing at David with knowing looks. Seeing this, David grew even more agitated. He jumped to his feet, his voice louder than necessary to mask his fear. "You need to investigate her carefully. My wife has been acting jealous and paranoid lately. Her mind isn't right. Who knows? Maybe she slipped the drug in when I stepped out for a moment." I heard every one of his cruel, baseless accusations. How painful it was. The man I had once loved more than myself was now trying to send me to prison to save his own skin. I stood up and walked toward them, looking David straight in the eye. My voice was surprisingly steady. "David, if you think I did it, what was my motive? To kill your secretary? Or are you afraid people will find out that the soup was never meant for Chloe in the first place, but for me?" David flinched, his eyes darting away to avoid my gaze. He stammered, What nonsense are you talking about?" Time dragged on, each minute waiting for the lab results, feeling like an eternity of mental torture. I sat quietly, my hand resting protectively on my lower abdomen, an instinctive gesture to shield my unborn child, who was at the center of this storm. Finally, a forensic technician emerged with a report. He announced in a serious tone, "On the lid of the thermos and the spoon, we found fingerprints belonging to Eleanor and the victim, Chloe. This matches their statements. However, and this is crucial, the toxic substance was thoroughly dissolved in the soup, deeply absorbed into every part of it. This indicates the drug was added during the cooking process, or immediately after, while the soup was still very hot and stirred well. It wasn't simply sprinkled on top after it was packaged." This conclusion was like a bucket of ice water thrown in David's face, completely demolishing the narrative he had tried to build to frame me. If I had added the drug at the office, it could never have been so evenly absorbed. David's face turned from pale to a ghastly gray. He began to ramble incoherently. "No, that's impossible. It must have been... Chloe must have taken the drug herself. That's right. She was pregnant and wanted to abort it, so she took the pills right before eating the soup. You have to investigate her. Don't frame an innocent man." I looked at my husband's pathetic display, feeling a mixture of amusement and sorrow. The man who was once my pride had been reduced to a coward who wouldn't take responsibility for his actions. I spoke up, my voice sharp, cutting through his nonsensical babbling. "David, stop struggling. If Chloe took the pills herself, why was the drug found in the soup? Are you suggesting she took the pills and then threw them back up into the bowl? Does that even sound plausible to you?" David spun around, his eyes blazing with red veins. "Shut up! What do you know? You hate me. You want to ruin me, so you orchestrated this whole thing. It was you. You snuck it in when I wasn't looking." His stubborn refusal to face reality made even the police officers shake their heads in dismay. The lead detective closed his file and looked at David with cold, sharp eyes. "Mr. Sterling, your statement has numerous contradictions with the forensic evidence. We need you to come with us to the station to clarify some matters. Furthermore, we will be pulling the footage from your car's dash cam and the security cameras in your home's kitchen area to verify the cooking process you described." At the mention of cameras, David jumped as if electrocuted. I knew for a fact that we had a security camera in our living room pointed directly at the kitchen, and his car had a dash cam that recorded his every move. That was evidence that could not lie. If he had really put the drug in the soup, there would surely be a trace of it. David's eyes darted around wildly. His initial confidence had completely vanished, replaced by the naked fear of a criminal standing before the judge. He knew the trap he had set for his wife was now closing tightly around his own neck. I stood up, smoothed my clothes, and looked at my despicable husband one last time before he was escorted away. "David," I said, "you once told me this soup was filled with your love. Now I understand. Your love smells like poison. Thank God for looking out for us. Our child didn't have to suffer the same fate as that poor, innocent baby." I left him there, frozen in the cold hospital hallway, and walked away without looking back, silently thanking fate for giving me a chance to survive and to fight for justice for myself and my unborn child. Leaving the hospital, I didn't go home. I took a cab straight to the office. The sky outside was a bleak gray, with dark clouds gathering like a brewing storm, perfectly mirroring my own turbulent emotions. As I stepped into the building's lobby, I could feel the stares and hear the hushed whispers of the employees. News of Chloe's poisoning had spread like a virus. The rumors were rampant, the most vicious being that the jealous wife, knowing the secretary was pregnant with her husband's child, had taken matters into her own hands. Hearing those fabrications felt like a knife twisting in my heart, but I knew I couldn't break down now. I had to be strong, to stand firm, to uncover the truth and clear my name. I went directly to my office and closed the door, shutting out the gossip and speculation. A few moments later, there was a gentle knock. It was Laura, my trusted assistant, who had been with me since the beginning. She came in, her face etched with worry, but her eyes were full of determination. She placed a flash drive on my desk and whispered, "Eleanor, I did what you asked. I pulled all the security footage from the building and the parking garage from this morning. I found something very unusual." I plugged the drive into my computer. Black and white images filled the screen. Laura pointed to the timestamp. "Look here. David's car entered the garage at 7:15 a.m., but he didn't get out of the elevator on this floor until 8:15. Normally, it takes less than 5 minutes to get from the garage to your office. So where was he for that entire hour? What was he doing?" Laura's question sent a chill down my spine. A missing hour. That was more than enough time to do something illicit. I stared intently at the screen, searching for more clues. Laura fast-forwarded the video to a different camera angle, one covering the emergency stairwell in the parking garage. "And there's this," she continued. "Take a close look at this person." On the screen, the figure of a man in a white shirt and a face mask appeared, walking hastily. He was carrying a large black trash bag and furtively walking from the direction of the elevators toward the building's main waste disposal area, rather than using the trash chutes on the office floors. "That's Mark," I gasped, instantly recognizing his slightly stooped posture and distinctive hairstyle. Mark was David's personal assistant and distant cousin, a man who followed David's every command like a loyal dog. Why would Mark be sneaking down the emergency stairs to throw out trash at that hour? And what was in that black bag? Was it the empty medicine packaging, gloves, the evidence of the crime that David wanted to dispose of after preparing the deadly soup during that missing hour? Laura looked at me, her voice firm. "I suspect that trash bag contains crucial evidence. I had someone check the dumpster area, but the garbage truck had just made its collection 30 minutes ago. However, I know Mark. He's careful, but also cheap. He wouldn't throw something important into a common dumpster right away. He'd likely hide it to dispose of later. I'll have someone tail him immediately." I nodded, gripping Laura's hand tightly. "Thank you, Laura. Right now, you're the only one I can trust. Be careful. They're cornered, and they could get reckless." Laura left, leaving me alone in the vast office. I looked out the window as heavy rain began to fall, streaking the glass. The web of lies spun by David and his accomplice was beginning to show its fatal flaws. That missing hour and Mark's suspicious actions were the keys I needed to turn the tables. The rain outside showed no signs of stopping. Heavy drops lashed against the window, leaving long, streaked marks like unhealable scars. I sat in my office, the light from my computer screen illuminating my weary face, my eyes burning with resolve. Laura, my sharp and efficient assistant, had just placed a thin file in front of me, but its weight felt immense. "Eleanor," Laura said in a low voice, filled with indignation on my behalf, "take a look at this. I had a contact in building management. Check it out. The luxury apartment Chloe is living in isn't rented under her name. It's registered to a shell corporation." I picked up the paper. The name Apex Holdings, LLC, jumped out at me. It sounded official, but I knew it was just an empty front. The legal representative of the company was Mark, David's assistant and cousin. Laura continued her analysis, pointing to the attached bank statements. The rent is $6,000 a month, plus expensive service fees, all of it transferred regularly from the Apex Holdings account. But the money flowing into this company was funneled from a slush fund David set up under the guise of client entertainment expenses. I let out a bitter laugh. $6,000 a month for rent, not to mention her spending on shopping and dining out. Meanwhile, the dress I was wearing was 3 years old, and my handbag was a simple, affordable one. David constantly complained about the company's financial struggles, telling me we had to tighten our belts for the future. It turned out the future he was planning for wasn't for our family, but for the lavish nest he had built for his young mistress. I turned the page. A photo caught my eye, a candid shot of Chloe entering a high-end private clinic. It had been taken 2 weeks ago. She went for a prenatal checkup, Laura explained. This meant Chloe was fully aware she was carrying David's child. She wasn't the innocent girl she appeared to be. She was using the pregnancy as a bargaining chip, a strategic move to force David's hand. I looked at Chloe's youthful face in the photo and shuddered. Behind that innocent facade was a calculating, worldly mind. She wanted to become the boss's wife in one fell swoop, to destroy my happiness, to build her own castle. But she never imagined that the man she chose to rely on was a cold-blooded monster, willing to eliminate his own flesh and blood to protect his interests. The phone on my desk suddenly buzzed, shattering the silence. The caller ID displayed My Love, a name I hadn't gotten around to changing. How bitterly ironic it sounded now. I took a deep breath, pressing a hand to my chest to calm my racing heart, and answered. David's familiar, deep voice came through the line, but now it sounded nauseatingly fake. "Eleanor, where are you? I just got back from the police station. I'm exhausted." They asked me all sorts of ridiculous questions. My head is splitting. I suppressed my anger, pretending my voice was shaky with worry. "I'm at the office. I'm so scared, David. Everyone is whispering. I don't dare go home. Are you okay? Did the police give you a hard time?" David sighed dramatically into the phone, playing the part of the wrongly accused husband. "What can they do to me? An innocent man has nothing to fear. I'm just worried about you, afraid you'll overthink things and affect your health. Stay put, or go to your mother's house to rest. Don't listen to the gossip. I'll handle everything." Hearing those empty words of concern, I wanted to scream at him that I knew everything. But reason held me back. I needed him to be complacent, to think I was still the naive, trusting wife, so he would let his guard down further. "Okay," I replied softly. "I trust you. You get some rest. I'll be home late tonight. I have a few things to wrap up here." Hanging up, I stared out at the white sheet of rain. "David, you think you're in control of this game? You are so wrong." Night fell, and the city lit up in a blaze of glory, but its glamour couldn't hide the dark corners of the human heart. I received a call from the private driver I had secretly hired, informing me that Chloe's mother, Brenda, had arrived at the bus station. She had taken the earliest bus from her hometown in rural Ohio as soon as she heard her daughter was in trouble. I instructed the driver to pick her up and take her to a clean but modest hotel near the hospital, specifically telling him not to take her to see Chloe yet, as visiting hours were over. She needed to rest after the long journey. I arrived at the hotel around 9 p.m. As I entered the lobby, I immediately recognized Brenda. She was huddled on a sofa, a small, frail figure in a worn brown coat. On her feet were a pair of old, faded slippers. Beside her were 2 large canvas bags, bulging with what I assumed were rice, vegetables, and other simple gifts a poor mother had carefully packed for her daughter. The sight made my eyes sting, reminding me of my own mother back home, who worked just as hard and sacrificed everything for her children. Seeing me approach, Brenda nervously stood up, her calloused, chapped hands twisting together. I smiled warmly and took her hand. "You must be Chloe's mother. I'm Eleanor, Chloe's supervisor at the company. I heard you were coming, so I wanted to check if you've had anything to eat and are settled in." Tears welled up in Brenda's eyes, her voice thick with a country accent. You're her boss? God bless you. You're too kind. My Chloe. She must have eaten something bad to get so sick. She's such a good girl at home, so hard-working. I helped her sit down and poured her a glass of warm water. Seeing the love and pride in her eyes as she spoke of her daughter, my heart ached. She had no idea that her good, hard-working daughter was living in a luxury apartment she could never dream of, carrying designer handbags that cost more than her entire life savings. I gently inquired, Brenda, does Chloe call home often? Does she tell you about her life or work here? Brenda answered honestly. Oh yes, she calls all the time. She says the company treats her well, the pay is good, and she gets to live in a free company dorm, a really nice one. Every month, she sends me $400 for my medicine. She tells me not to worry, that she's doing just fine up here. Hearing this, I couldn't help but sigh. $400 sent home to show her filial piety, yet she was willing to spend thousands on a luxury item to please her lover. How fragile and fake that devotion seemed. I decided I had to show Brenda the truth, even though I knew it would be cruel. I feigned surprise. Oh, she told you she lives in a dorm? I thought Chloe was renting a luxury condo in Greenwich Village. That area is incredibly expensive. The monthly rent there is more than a factory worker's annual salary, and I've noticed she uses a lot of designer things. The handbag she carried to work the other day, I heard it costs nearly $3,000. Brenda was stunned, her weary eyes wide with disbelief. What did you say? $3,000 for a purse? That can't be right. My daughter is very frugal. She wouldn't even throw away a torn shirt, and she told me she lived in a company dorm. I gently patted her hand, my voice low and suggestive. Maybe Chloe didn't want you to worry, so she didn't tell you the truth. But you rest up for now. Tomorrow, I'll take you to the hospital, and you can ask her about it yourself. I'm just worried. She's young and beautiful, and there are so many temptations in the city. I'd hate to see her get taken advantage of. My words planted a seed of doubt in the poor mother's heart. Brenda sat there, stunned, her gaze fixed on nothing, her trembling hands fiddling with the hem of her old coat. She was beginning to realize that the little girl she remembered was now a stranger, hiding earth-shattering secrets from her. I left the hotel with a heavy heart. I didn't want to hurt her, but Brenda was the most important witness, the only person who could awaken any remaining conscience in Chloe, and the leverage I needed to expose David's true character. In this war, no one would be left unscathed, not even the most innocent. The next morning, as I was driving out of my apartment building's garage to head to the office, a figure suddenly blocked my way. I slammed on the brakes, my heart leaping into my throat. Once I collected myself, I saw it was Mark. He stood there, looking shifty, his eyes darting around as if afraid of being seen. He tapped lightly on my window, signaling that he wanted to talk. I rolled down the window just enough to hear him, maintaining a safe distance. "Eleanor," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Can I have a minute? I have something important. David told me to give this to you personally." I smirked and unlocked the passenger door. In the confined space of the car, I could smell the sour sweat and stale cigarette smoke coming off him. He was clearly on edge. Mark shakily pulled a thin file from his coat pocket and placed it on my lap, retracting his hand as if it had been burned. "What is this?" I asked, my voice cold, not even glancing at him. It's Chloe's old medical file that David just found this morning," Mark stammered, sweat beading on his temples. "In here, there's also a receipt showing she bought the abortion pills herself from an under-the-table pharmacy yesterday. David said you should take this and find a way to give it to the police. Say you found it by chance in Chloe's desk drawer. That way, David will be cleared, and you won't be involved." I picked up the file and slowly opened it. Inside was a cursory health exam paper and a crumpled retail receipt. I held the receipt up to the light. The handwritten scrawl clearly listed the name misoprostol. The date of purchase was yesterday afternoon, but ridiculously, the ink on the receipt was still fresh, and the paper was pristine white, without a single old crease. It was obviously a fake, hastily created overnight. "Trying to frame a dead man, are we?" I muttered. then turned to Mark with a glare so sharp it made him cringe. "Do you and David think I was born yesterday? The ink on this receipt is barely dry. You want me to give this to the police? That's the same as telling them I fabricated evidence. Or are you trying to frame Chloe for attempting suicide out of depression, clearing David's name, and making me look like an accomplice who knew and did nothing?" Mark's face went white, his lips trembling. No, that's not it," David said. "He said if you just present it, everything will be over. You're his wife. You have to help him. If something happens to him, the company will collapse, and you'll lose everything too." He was trying to play on my fear of losing wealth and status. But he was mistaken. This company was built on my father's sweat and tears. I would rather burn it to the ground and start over than let it fall into the hands of a murderer. I threw the file back at Mark. "Take this garbage and get out of my car now," I said, my voice like steel. "And go tell David that if he wants to put on a play, he should hire better actors. As for you, Mark, you're an accessory to a crime. You'd better start looking out for yourself before you end up regretting it in a prison cell." Mark scrambled to pick up the file, opened the door, and fled like a ghost. Watching his pathetic figure disappear behind a concrete pillar, I knew David was in a full-blown panic. He was thrashing in the quicksand of his own making, and the more he struggled, the tighter the noose would become. This clumsy charade wouldn't save him. It would only serve as more evidence of the cruelty and cowardice of a despicable husband and boss. Back in my office, I called Laura in immediately. The atmosphere in the room became as tense as a war room. Laura placed her laptop on the desk, her face glowing with the excitement of a treasure hunter. "Eleanor, just as you suspected, I reviewed all of David's and Mark's call logs from the past week. A strange number appeared with high frequency, especially the night before the incident. I traced it and found the owner. You're not going to believe this. It's Vanessa." "Vanessa." I searched my memory for the name. Laura quickly elaborated. "Vanessa was in the same graduating class as David. She's a pharmacist now, working as a sales rep for a major pharmaceutical company. I heard from some of the older HR staff that she and David had a fling back in the day, but it ended when he married you. I can't believe they're in contact again." A pharmacist, an ex-girlfriend, and secret late-night calls. The scattered puzzle pieces began to form a complete picture. David couldn't buy that restricted drug himself without raising suspicion, so he had turned to Vanessa. He must have used sweet talk, promised her money, or rekindled old feelings to persuade her to help him. "Did you find any evidence of them meeting?" I asked, my heart pounding. Laura nodded, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Right here. I had the private investigator pull security footage from near Apex Holdings, that shell company Mark runs. Look at the corner of the screen." A grainy, black-and-white video played. A familiar car pulled up in a blind spot. Mark got out, looking around nervously. A moment later, a tall woman in sunglasses approached. It was Vanessa. She handed Mark a small package wrapped in newspaper. Mark took it, quickly stuffed it in his pocket, and they both hurried off in separate directions. The timestamp on the video was the afternoon before the poisoning. "A small package wrapped in newspaper," I whispered, my eyes glued to the screen. That was the poison. Vanessa was the one who supplied David with the weapon. I turned to Laura, my gaze resolute. "Laura, she is the weakest link in their chain. Vanessa is an educated woman with a stable career. She might have done this for money or for love, but she's certainly not a career criminal. She will be terrified if she knows she's facing prison time as an accomplice to attempted murder." Laura understood immediately. "You mean we're going to use psychological pressure on her?" I nodded, a cold smile on my lips. "Exactly. David is trying to frame Chloe, and he's likely prepared a script to frame Vanessa too. If this all comes out, he'll claim she gave him the drug on her own, or tricked him into thinking it was a supplement. We have to get to her first. I'm going to meet with Vanessa and show her the dark future David has planned for her. Between going to prison for an old flame and becoming a witness for a plea deal, I'm sure Vanessa is smart enough to know which path to choose." The net had been cast, and the most important prey had been flushed out. I knew the upcoming meeting with Vanessa would be a battle of wits, but I held trump cards that David could never have anticipated. The raw, brutal truth was about to be exposed, and those who had sown the wind were about to reap the whirlwind. The next morning, the sky was still a gloomy gray, threatening to unleash another downpour on the city. I picked up Brenda from the hotel and took her to the hospital to see her daughter. In her hands, the frail countrywoman still clutched an old plastic basket containing a few dozen fresh eggs and some vegetables she had hastily picked from her garden. "Chloe loves the eggs our chickens lay," she'd said. "She always says the ones in the city taste bland." Hearing her words, my heart tightened. A mother's love is as vast as the ocean, yet her child had traded that devotion for the shallow glamour of the city. Entering the hospital room, the strong smell of antiseptic made Brenda cringe. Chloe had been moved to a recovery room. She lay listlessly on the stark white bed, her once beautiful face now sallow and gaunt, like a wilted leaf. Seeing her mother, Chloe's eyes fluttered open, her dry lips weakly forming the word, "Mom." Brenda rushed to her side, placing the basket on the floor and taking her daughter's cold hand, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, my child, how did this happen? One minute you were fine, and the next you're so sick you lost the—" She choked on her words, unable to finish the sentence, afraid to touch upon her daughter's deepest pain. Chloe turned her face away, avoiding her mother's gaze, her own tears tracing paths down her cheeks. But Brenda, with the sharp instincts of a woman who had scrimped and saved her whole life, noticed the nightstand. There, Chloe's expensive designer handbag sat next to the latest model smartphone. The stark contrast between those luxury items, the worn plastic basket on the floor, and Brenda's own faded clothes, made the room feel suffocating. Brenda's hand trembled as she pointed to the bag, her voice cracking. "That purse. Eleanor said it cost $3,000. Where did you get the money for that, Chloe? Your salary is barely enough to get by, and you still have to pinch pennies to send money home to me. How could you be so extravagant?" Chloe looked at me in a panic, then turned back to her mother, denying everything. "No, Mom. Eleanor's mistaken. It's a fake. I bought it at a street market for a few dollars. Don't listen to her." I leaned against the door, my arms crossed, silently observing the clumsy performance. I walked slowly toward the bed, placing a gentle hand on Chloe's shoulder. My voice was low, but it was enough to instill a profound fear in her. I leaned in close to her ear and whispered, "Do you really think David is coming to visit you? He's busy trying to prove to the police that you bought those pills and took them yourself. Is this bag real or fake? You and he know the truth. Stop lying to your mother." Chloe froze, her eyes wide with terror. She understood that I knew everything, and more importantly, that the man she had trusted with her future was trying to discard her like a used-up object. Seeing her daughter tremble, Brenda thought she was in pain and began to rub her arms, murmuring words of comfort. I felt no triumph watching this scene, only a deep, pervasive sadness. The brutal truth had to come out, and the person who would suffer most was not the one who had committed the sin, but the innocent old mother who loved her child unconditionally. I pulled a chair to a far corner, pretending to look at my phone to give them some privacy, but I was watching Chloe's every reaction. Before sitting down, I deliberately left the file Mark had given me on the table next to her handbag, positioned so that the fake receipt for the misoprostol was peeking out. I knew Chloe's curiosity, and in her state of extreme anxiety, any clue related to David was a lifeline she would grasp at. Sure enough, while Brenda was getting a glass of water, Chloe's eyes fell on the file. She furtively reached for it, flipping it open. I saw her thin shoulders shake violently as she read the receipt with her name on it. Her face turned from pale to a deathly white. She recognized the handwriting, the name of the drug, and most importantly, the sinister intention behind that flimsy piece of paper. David, the man who had promised her the world, was now fabricating evidence to frame her as the one who had killed her own child. Her blind faith shattered in an instant, leaving behind a chasm of despair. At that moment, the door opened, and her doctor walked in. He looked at her chart, then at Chloe with a look of pity. The room grew heavy. The doctor sighed, his voice somber. "The family needs to prepare themselves. Because the patient took an overdose of the drug, it caused severe uterine trauma and prolonged bleeding. We did everything we could, but her ability to have children in the future, I'm afraid it's highly unlikely, close to zero. The news was a devastating blow. Brenda collapsed to the floor, her heartbroken sobs echoing through the room. "Oh God, no! My daughter is so young! Why would God be so cruel to her?" The old mother's cries were like knives twisting in my heart. Chloe lay motionless, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling, not a single tear falling. The pain was beyond what she could process. Her child was gone, her ability to be a mother was gone, and she had been betrayed and framed by her lover. Her entire world had been destroyed in a single day. I helped Brenda up, my own heart heavy. I looked at Chloe, at the emptiness in her eyes, and leaned in one last time. My voice was cold, but tinged with pity. "Do you see now? This is the price of destroying another woman's marriage. This is the price of those fancy designer bags. He didn't just take your child, he took your entire future as a mother. Do you still want to protect him?" Chloe turned her head and looked at me, her lips trembling, her eyes flashing with a deep, burning hatred. Leaving the hospital with a conflicted heart, I drove to my meeting with Vanessa. It was at a discreet cafe tucked away in a small alley, elegantly decorated and, most importantly, equipped with high-definition security cameras covering every angle. I chose a corner table where I could see the entrance but maintain some privacy. I stirred my orange juice, trying to calm my mind before the coming storm. Right on time, Vanessa arrived. She walked in with the chic, confident air of a successful woman. She wore a wine-red silk dress that accentuated her fair skin and slender figure, carried an expensive handbag, and wore large sunglasses. She scanned the cafe before her eyes landed on me, a condescending smirk on her lips. She strode over and sat down opposite me, removing her sunglasses to reveal sharp, perfectly made-up eyes. "Well, hello, Eleanor," she began, her voice sweet but laced with thorns. I never thought the perfect, virtuous wife would be asking to meet her husband's old flame in a place like this. "What can I do for you? Looking for advice on how to keep your man? It's strange, though. Whatever you've been doing, it seems to have bored him so much he had to run to me for comfort." Her words were deliberately provocative, designed to get a reaction. In the past, I might have flown into a rage or burst into tears, but the Eleanor of today had been through too much to be swayed by such cheap taunts. I looked at her calmly and smiled faintly. "Vanessa, I didn't ask you here to fight over a cheating man. You can have David, for all I care. I'm here to save you from making a catastrophic mistake before you turn yourself into an accomplice to a felony." Vanessa laughed out loud, the sound jarring in the quiet cafe. "Save me? Are you joking? What could I possibly need saving from? I have money, a career, freedom. You should worry about yourself." I didn't argue. I silently took out my phone, pulled up the security camera photo the private investigator had captured, and slid it across the table. My voice turned hard. "Take a good look. 2 afternoons ago, at a corner near Apex Holdings, you met with Mark, David's assistant. What was in that small, newspaper-wrapped package you gave him? Was it vitamins? Or was it misoprostol?" The smile vanished from Vanessa's face. She picked up the phone, staring at the image, her hands beginning to tremble. Her face paled, the thick makeup unable to hide the panic rising in her eyes. The cigarette she was about to light dropped from her fingers. She looked up at me, her voice losing its confident edge. Where did you get this? I was just giving him some documents. You have no right to make such accusations." I stared directly into her eyes, my gaze as sharp as a knife. "What kind of documents need to be wrapped in newspaper and exchanged in secret? Vanessa, you're a pharmacist. You know the regulations on restricted medications better than anyone. The police aren't fools. Once they trace the source of that drug, do you really think you can get away with it?" Vanessa slumped in her chair, her initial arrogance gone, replaced by the image of a woman terrified of facing prison. I knew I had her. It was time for the final blow. I leaned back, my voice low, a mix of threat and persuasion. "Vanessa, do you think David will protect you? This morning, he had Mark forge evidence to frame Chloe for buying the drug herself. So, what do you think he'll say when the police come for him? He'll say that you, jealous and wanting him back, tricked him into buying poison to harm his wife. He will sacrifice you without a second thought." Vanessa shuddered, her eyes wide with horror. She knew David's character, a selfish man who would throw anyone under the bus to save himself. I continued my assault on her defenses. You have money, beauty, a bright future ahead of you. Are you willing to trade all of that for a long prison sentence as an accomplice to attempted murder? How much did David promise you? 100,000? 200,000? Is that enough to buy back your freedom, your reputation, after getting out with a felony record? Every question was a hammer blow to her conscience. She covered her face and began to sob, her shoulders shaking. The glamorous facade had crumbled, revealing a weak, regretful woman. I don't want to go to jail, she stammered through her tears. I thought it was a normal abortion pill. David told me his wife, you were pregnant with another man's child, and he wanted to get rid of it so he could file for divorce. I just wanted to help him and make a little money. I scoffed silently, filled with contempt. To them, the life of a child was just a tool to achieve their goals. I leaned forward. Now is not the time for tears. You have only one way out. Give me the evidence of David's order, the text messages, the call recordings. I will submit them to the police and ensure they know you were deceived and your trust was manipulated. You will become a witness, receive leniency, and have a chance to start over. You can choose to go to prison with David, or you can choose to save yourself. Vanessa looked up, her eyes flickering between fear and a fragile hope. She bit her lip so hard it bled, wrestling with her decision for a few long seconds. Finally, her survival instinct won. She shakily opened her designer handbag and pulled out a small, silver thumb drive. She placed it on the table and pushed it toward me as if it were a hot coal. "It's all in here," she said, her voice hoarse. Recordings of his calls asking me to get the drug, screenshots of the wire transfers for the deposit, even the promises he made to leave you and come back to me. "Take it, please. Just don't let me go to prison." I picked up the thumb drive, clenching it in my palm. It felt cold, but it held enough heat to burn David's entire life to the ground. I stood up and gave Vanessa one last look, a mixture of pity and warning. "You made the right choice. Now, keep your mouth shut and wait to hear from me. Don't be foolish enough to warn David, or you will lose this final chance." Holding the tiny thumb drive in my palm, I felt its immense weight. It contained not just data, but the death sentence for my marriage. I didn't dare go home or stay at the office, so I drove to a trusted friend's private investigation firm, a place with soundproof rooms where I could face the truth alone. The room was dark, lit only by the blue glow of the computer monitor. My hand trembled so much that it took me 3 tries to insert the thumb drive correctly. A folder appeared, filled with audio files and screenshots of messages, all meticulously organized by date. It was clear Vanessa had been preparing for David's potential betrayal for some time. I clicked on the most recent recording, dated 3 days ago. The computer speakers crackled, and then my husband's voice filled the room, chillingly familiar yet terrifyingly cold. "See what you can do," his voice, devoid of its usual polished charm, said flatly. "Get me something strong, preferably colorless and odorless, something I can mix into food. My wife is dealing with morning sickness, and I want it to look like a natural miscarriage. Clean, that way I can kick her out without a messy asset division. That fetus is an obstacle. You get it?" Every word was a poisoned needle, piercing my ears and stabbing my heart. I covered my mouth to stifle a sob, hot tears streaming down my face. So, the original target of that fateful soup had been me and the child growing inside me. He hadn't wanted to nourish me. He wanted to murder his own flesh and blood, simply to protect the assets he greedily wished to keep for himself. Chloe eating that soup was just an accident, a cruel twist of fate that had narrowly saved my baby and me. The next recording was a call between David and Vanessa after Chloe had been hospitalized. His voice was now frantic and ruthless. "You keep your mouth shut. Don't you dare say a word. Blame it all on Chloe. Say she bought the pills herself. I'll take care of things with the cops. If you breathe a word about me, you'll regret it. Remember, if I go down, you're not walking away clean either." The blatant threats, the complete shirking of responsibility, it made my stomach turn. The man I had loved and shared my life with for 3 years was a monster in human skin, ready to sacrifice his mistress and his old friend to protect his title and his hollow reputation. I copied all the data onto 3 separate flash drives, one sent to a secure email, one to my lawyer, and the original kept safely in my purse. I sat stunned before the dark screen, my hand on my belly. "My love," I whispered to my baby, "I'm so sorry I chose the wrong father for you. But don't you worry, I will never let anyone harm you again. Tomorrow, I will make the wicked pay for every one of our tears." My grief slowly hardened into a cold, unyielding resolve. I knew there was no turning back, and I no longer wanted to. At the office, tension hung heavy in the air. Employees tiptoed around, whispering about the unprecedented scandal. I sat in my office, my eyes glued to a monitor displaying a live feed from a hidden camera Laura had installed in the finance department. Mark was there, pacing like a caged animal, his shirt soaked with sweat. He was furtively trying to access the internal accounting system, his trembling fingers flying across the keyboard, attempting to erase the trail of illicit money transfers. He knew the authorities could raid the office at any moment, and the wire transfers from the company account to Vanessa and his shell company, Apex Holdings, would be irrefutable evidence. However, Mark didn't know that Laura and my loyal IT team had already secured the system the night before. His every attempt to delete data was blocked by an invisible firewall, while the system automatically backed up his actions and sent alerts to my server. I watched the look of sheer desperation on his face as the screen flashed a bright red "Access denied." He slammed his fist on the desk, tore at his hair, and then frantically pulled out his phone. I put on my headphones, activating the bug I had planted under David's desk months ago when my suspicions about his fidelity first began. Mark's terrified, shaky voice filled my ears. "David, I'm screwed. The computer won't let me delete the data. It's like someone locked my admin rights. What do I do? If the cops see these books, I'm finished." From the other end, David's voice roared like a wounded beast. "You useless fool. I told you to be careful. Now listen to me. Find a way to pin it all on Chloe. Forge evidence. Print out some fake emails saying she was severely depressed and suicidal. That's why she bought the pills. You have to make them believe she was crazy. You understand?" But sir," Mark feebly protested, a shred of conscience wrestling with his fear. "She just lost her baby. Doing that it's evil." David let out a cold, chilling laugh that made me shudder. "Evil or prison? You choose. If you don't get this done, I'll let you rot in a cell right next to Vanessa. Now get to it." The call ended. Mark slumped into his chair, burying his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. I took off my headphones, filled with utter contempt. Even at this final stage, David felt no remorse. He was still trying to trample on the pain of others to save himself. He wanted to turn Chloe, the victim of his cruelty and betrayal, into a suicidal madwoman. News that David and Mark were intentionally spreading rumors of Chloe being depressed and suicidal quickly circulated within the company and, inevitably, reached Brenda. The gentle country mother, who had spent her life toiling in fields, suddenly transformed into a fierce mother hen protecting her chick. Brenda stormed into the company lobby during the lunch hour, when it was bustling with employees. She wore her old, faded clothes, but she carried herself with an unstoppable fury. She was weeping and screaming, her voice raw with pain. "Where is that bastard CEO? You come out here. You deceived my daughter, you ruined her life, and now you're framing her for suicide? There is a God, and you will get what you deserve." Building security rushed to intervene, but no one dared to be rough with an elderly woman in such profound distress. A crowd of employees gathered, whispering and recording with their phones. David was forced to appear. He stepped out of his private elevator, his face a grim mask, trying to maintain a facade of calm. He approached Brenda, his voice low but menacing. "Ma'am, please calm down. We can discuss this. Making a scene here isn't going to help. Please come to my office, and I will explain everything." Brenda stared at him, her bloodshot eyes filled with hatred. She ignored his invitation and pointed a finger straight at his face. "I'm not going anywhere. We'll talk right here, so everyone can hear." "You say my daughter is suicidal?" "My daughter loves life. She was sending money home to build me a house. Why would she want to die? It was you. You and your hypocritical world pushed her to this. David's face paled. He signaled for Mark, who brought out a thick envelope. David tried to press it into Brenda's hand, whispering just loud enough for her to hear. "Here's $10,000. Take it, pay for her medical bills, and take her home. Stop making trouble for me. I'm a victim in this too." I watched from the mezzanine level, my heart aching as I witnessed the cheap bribery attempt. $10,000, was that the price for a young woman's dignity, health, and her future as a mother? Brenda took the envelope, her hands shaking as she opened it. When she saw the crisp $100 bills, she let out a twisted, bitter laugh. Then, suddenly, she threw the entire stack of money right in David's face. The bills fluttered through the air like dead leaves, scattering across the polished floor. "I may be poor, but I don't sell my daughter's blood," Brenda shrieked, her cry silencing the entire lobby. "Your money is filthy. I will sue you. I will sue you to the end, even if I have to sell my house. You give my daughter her good name back." David stood frozen in the rain of money, his face burning with humiliation and rage. The crowd began to point, their looks of contempt fixed on the once respected CEO. In that moment, I knew David had lost. He could use money to buy many things, but he couldn't buy the self-respect of a mother who loved her child. The image of those fluttering bills would be a stain on his life that could never be washed away. After the chaos at the office, I returned home after dark. The large house was shrouded in darkness, cold and silent like a tomb. I walked into the living room to find David sitting on the sofa, a glass of strong liquor in his hand, his gaze lost in the distance. He didn't look up when I entered, his voice a low rasp. "You're home. Must have been quite a show at the office today. I bet you enjoyed watching me get humiliated by some old countrywoman." I switched on a lamp. The soft light illuminated his gaunt, haggard face. I set my purse down, my voice calm. I didn't enjoy it. I just felt sad. Sad that you let things get this far. "Why did you offer her money?" That was practically an admission of guilt. David scoffed, tilting his head back to drain his glass. "What do you know? In this world, anything that can't be solved with money can be solved with a lot more money. That old woman is just a fool." He stood up and went to the kitchen. A moment later, he returned with a warm glass of milk. He placed it in front of me, his voice suddenly, unnervingly gentle. "Let's forget about work for tonight. Drink this. It will help you settle. You've gotten so thin lately. I worry about you. This is a special organic milk a friend brought back from overseas. It's very good for expectant mothers." He caught himself. "I mean, very good for women." The slip of the tongue "expectant mothers" made my heart stop. Was he testing me, or was he genuinely trying to poison me again? I stared at the steaming white milk, and all I could see was another bowl of poison. I picked up the glass, feeling its warmth spread through my palm, and looked directly at David. "David, do you remember the tomato soup from the other day? You also said it was to nourish me, and Chloe almost died. This milk, are you sure it's just milk?" The color drained from David's face, his smile vanishing. He took a step back, his eyes wavering. What are you talking about? Are you accusing me? I'm your husband." I let out a cold, humorless laugh. I stood up, carried the glass of milk over to a large potted plant in the corner, and, as David watched in stunned silence, I slowly poured the entire contents into the soil. "I'm not accusing you," I said, my voice like ice. "I'm just afraid of getting a stomachache like Chloe did. This plant could use the nutrients anyway. Let's see if it's still alive tomorrow." The sound of the glass being set down hard on the table echoed in the silent room. David stared at me, all pretense gone, replaced by raw fear. He knew. I knew everything. The curtain had officially fallen on our happy family act. Tonight would be the longest night of our lives, because when the sun rose tomorrow, the real storm would hit, washing away everything that was left of our rotten marriage. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual and took my time getting ready, dressing meticulously. Today was not just a board meeting, it was a funeral, the funeral for my 3-year marriage, and a farewell to the betrayers in my life. The atmosphere at the office was strangely quiet. Everyone seemed to sense the storm that was about to break. I walked straight into the large conference room, where the board members and senior management had already gathered. David sat at the head of the table. His gray suit seemed to hang off his gaunt frame. The dark circles under his eyes betrayed an anxiety he couldn't hide, though he tried to project authority by tapping his pen on the polished wood. Seeing me enter, his eyes flashed with alarm before he quickly looked away. He cleared his throat and signaled for Mark to begin the meeting. The main agenda was a proposal for a new eco-resort investment, a project David had painted as a lucrative opportunity. But I knew it was just a glamorous facade for him to embezzle company funds, funneling them into shell corporations to hide assets before our divorce. Mark's presentation was a stammering mess. Sweat poured down his face despite the cold air conditioning. He kept darting fearful glances at me. The board members below began to whisper, some frowning in doubt at the project's wildly optimistic financial projections. When it was time to vote, David stood up hastily, his voice strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We need to approve this today to meet the funding deadline. I urge you all to trust the board's vision and pass this resolution." Just as he finished, I slowly stood up. The sound of my chair scraping against the floor was sharp and loud, drawing every eye in the room. I looked directly at David, my voice calm but icy. "Hold on, David, and esteemed members of the board. Before we discuss how to spend the company's money, I believe we need to address the moral character and legal standing of the person in charge of that money." David slammed his hand on the table. "Eleanor, this is a strategy meeting, not a marketplace for you to air our family drama. Whatever issues we have, we will discuss them at home. Do not waste everyone's time." I remained unfazed, a slight smile on my lips. "David, you having an affair and an illegitimate child is a family matter. But you, using company funds to support your mistress, creating shell companies to launder money, and, more seriously, purchasing illegal substances to harm another person, that is a matter for the law. It's a matter of this company's survival. The shareholders here have a right to know if their money is in the hands of a CEO or a potential felon." A shocked murmur erupted in the room. David's face was ashen. He pointed a trembling finger at me, speechless. Before he could recover or call security, I signaled to Laura, who connected my laptop to the room's projector. The large screen behind David lit up. First, the bank statements appeared, showing a clear trail of transfers from the company account to Chloe's personal account and to Apex Holdings. The six-figure numbers were highlighted in red, stark against the white background. Next came screenshots of text messages between David and Mark, discussing the falsification of documents for the shell company. The board members, even those once loyal to David, began to shake their heads, their expressions shifting from doubt to profound disappointment and anger. "This is the preliminary evidence of embezzlement," I announced, my voice clear and steady. "But the worst is yet to come." I clicked on the audio file from Vanessa. The room fell silent. After a brief crackle, David's unmistakable voice filled the space. "I want it to look like a natural miscarriage. Clean. That fetus is an obstacle. Get me something strong." The cruel, calculated words echoed in the luxurious conference room like a voice from hell. Several female board members gasped, covering their mouths. The men frowned, their faces hardening with disgust. David went berserk. He lunged for the projector cable, screaming, "Turn it off! It's fake! It's all fabricated! This woman, she's using software to frame me. Don't believe her." But Laura and two security guards I had arranged for were already there, blocking his path. David struggled helplessly, his face flushed, veins bulging in his neck. He looked to Mark for help, but Mark had already ducked under the table, trembling. I walked toward David, looking into his bloodshot eyes. My voice was cold with contempt. "You say it's fake? What about the toxicology report from the soup you cooked with your own hands? What about the testimony from Vanessa, the ex-girlfriend you used to buy the drugs? Do you think the entire world conspired to frame you, David? No one framed you. Your own greed and cruelty dug this grave for you." I turned to the board. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have all the legal evidence and living witnesses. Copies have already been sent to the district attorney's office." I propose an immediate vote to remove David Sterling from his position as CEO, to cooperate with the investigation, and to protect this company's reputation." A smattering of applause grew into a unified ovation. David stood alone, exposed. He sagged against the wall, his eyes vacant, and slid to the floor. The career he had built, the reputation he had curated it, had all crumbled in a single morning. Just as the applause died down, the heavy doors of the conference room swung open. The charged atmosphere froze. 2 police detectives in stern suits walked in, followed by Vanessa, her face hidden behind dark sunglasses, and my personal lawyer. Vanessa kept her head down, her hands clenched together. Her appearance was the final, fatal blow. David stared at her in disbelief, stammering, "Vanessa, why? Why are you here?" The lead detective walked up to David, his voice firm and clear. "David Sterling, you are under arrest for assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm and the illegal purchase of a controlled substance. You have the right to remain silent." Simultaneously, the other detective approached Mark, who was still cowering in the corner. Upon seeing the police, Mark burst into tears. "It wasn't me! I didn't know anything! It was David! He forced me to do everything. He told me to fake the papers, to get rid of the trash. I was just following orders. I'll confess everything. Please, have mercy on me." Mark's swift and cowardly betrayal left David stunned. He looked at his cousin, his trusted subordinate, his eyes filled with despair. You traitor," David hissed. But before he could finish, the sharp click of handcuffs echoed through the room. The hands that had signed billion-dollar deals, that had once lovingly stroked my hair, were now locked in cold metal. As he was being led past me, David stopped. He looked at me, his eyes red and his voice trembling. "Eleanor, how long were you planning this? Why were you so cruel to me? After all, we were husband and wife." I looked at him, feeling no pity, only a vast emptiness. I leaned in close and whispered the words I had held back for days. "From the moment you brought me that soup, from the moment you tried to kill our child. You call me cruel? Compared to a man who would poison his own wife and child, putting you in prison is an act of mercy. Goodbye, David." He hung his head and was led away. The door closed, but the shock of his arrest lingered. At the police station, faced with irrefutable evidence, the testimonies, the toxicology report, the audio recordings, David confessed. He admitted to buying the drug to harm me for financial gain, but he insisted Chloe's poisoning and miscarriage was an accident. He swore he never knew she was pregnant. "I swear, I had no idea she was pregnant," he cried, his voice thick with self-pity. "She told me she was on birth control. It was just a fling. I'm not stupid enough to get her pregnant. If I had known, I would have made her get an abortion long ago." His words were so cold, so callous, that even the seasoned detective frowned. The detective silently slid a lab report across the table. "You say you didn't know, Mr. Sterling, but science doesn't lie. This is the DNA analysis from the fetal tissue the hospital provided for the investigation. The results confirm with 99.99% certainty that you were the father. And ironically, genetic analysis indicates it was a boy." David stared at the paper, his hands shaking violently. His eyes were glued to the words confirming his paternity. "A son? It was a son?" he mumbled, his voice cracking. Suddenly, he let out a primal scream of anguish and slammed his head against the table. He wept, not from remorse for his crime, but from the loss of a male heir he had so desperately wanted. His family had always held deeply patriarchal values, and he had always been disappointed that he presumed I was carrying a girl. I watched it all from behind a one-way mirror, a chill running through me. Even now, at his lowest point, his mind was filled only with his own selfish, archaic desires. That poor, innocent boy was lucky he was never born to call such a man his father. I turned and walked away, silently thanking God for protecting my daughter. She may not have a father, but I would love her enough for two. Chloe was discharged from the hospital after a week. She had survived, but her ability to ever become a mother was gone. The luxury apartment was sealed off as part of the investigation, so Brenda took her to a cramped, damp room for rent in a rough part of the city. I didn't want to push anyone over the edge, especially with the mastermind behind bars. So, before they were to return to Ohio, I went to see them. The small room smelled of mildew. Chloe sat huddled in a corner, a ghost of her former self, hair unkempt, eyes vacant and hollow. Brenda was packing old clothes into a canvas bag. Seeing me, she wiped away tears. "Miss Eleanor, you came. We're leaving soon. Thank you for not pressing charges against her. She knows she was wrong." My heart ached for this poor mother. I walked over and placed a thick envelope on a rickety plastic table. Brenda immediately refused. "No, please, your mercy is more than we could ask for. We can't take your money." I took her rough, calloused hand and pressed the envelope into it. "Brenda, please take this. It's not charity. It's Chloe's final paycheck, plus a little extra to help with travel and medical expenses. Take care of her. She's young, and she's paid a terrible price for her mistakes. The important thing is to find a way to live on." Brenda broke down, her sobs filling the small room. "My life is so hard, miss. Why is my daughter's fate so cruel?" In the corner, Chloe began to weep silently, her thin shoulders shaking. I looked at her, my voice firm but not unkind. "Chloe, you lost your child and your ability to be a mother. That is a woman's greatest pain. But I hope you remember this lesson. Never build your happiness on the suffering of others. And never believe that beauty is a shortcut to a lasting, happy life. Live a decent life. Repay your mother's love. Don't make her cry for you ever again." As they left, Chloe glanced back at the city one last time, her eyes filled with tears. This place, once her land of promise, was now the site of her ruin. In the aftermath, with David gone, the company was in chaos. I was elected interim CEO by the board. My first act was to fire David's entire inner circle. I wanted to clean house and run the company with transparency and integrity. I held a press conference, apologized for the scandal, and promised to steer the ship back on course. My decisiveness began to restore confidence. The drama, however, wasn't over. David's mother, a venomous and greedy woman, showed up at my office one day, screaming accusations. "You she-devil! You sent my son to prison to steal his company." I calmly showed her the evidence, the recordings of her innocent son planning to murder her grandchild. She collapsed onto the sofa, speechless and horrified, before stumbling out of my office in a daze of shame and disbelief. Weeks later, her lawyer came with a demand to split the marital assets. I calmly reminded him of the prenuptial agreement David had signed and the tens of millions he had embezzled. The lawyer left in a hurry. Months passed. My belly grew, a testament to the new life I was protecting. 6 months after David's arrest, on a rainy night, I went into labor. At the hospital, in the midst of overwhelming pain, I remembered being in that same hallway, but under circumstances of horror and death. Tonight was about hope and life. After an arduous labor, the sound of a baby's cry filled the room. "Congratulations," the nurse said, placing a tiny, warm bundle on my chest. "It's a beautiful baby girl." Tears of pure joy streamed down my face. My daughter was here, safe and healthy. I named her Anne, a simple name for the simple peace I wished for her. "Welcome to the world, my little Anne," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "Thank you for staying with me." A thought struck me then. If not for that bout of morning sickness, this perfect moment would have never happened. That fateful soup had taken one life, but saved another. The day of David's sentencing, I stayed home with Anne, watching the news. "David Sterling," the reporter announced, "has been sentenced to 12 years in prison for assault and the illegal purchase of a controlled substance. His accomplice, Mark, received 7 years. On the screen, David stood before the judge, a broken man. I felt nothing, no anger, no pity, no satisfaction, just a quiet, peaceful emptiness. The past was finally over. As for the others, Vanessa, the pharmacist, received a suspended sentence but had her license permanently revoked. She lost her job, her apartment, her car, everything. She sent me a long, pleading text of apology one night. I read it, and then I deleted it without a reply. Her remorse meant nothing to me. 2 years later, Sterling Solutions was more successful than ever. I stood by my office window, looking down at the bustling city below, a successful CEO and a proud single mother. My 2-year-old daughter, Anne, ran into the room, a bundle of joy in a pink dress. My phone buzzed. It was a message from a kind man I'd recently met, a business partner named Michael. "Hi, Eleanor. It's Michael. I was wondering if you and Anne were free this weekend? I know a beautiful picnic spot outside the city. I think Anne would love it. I'd be honored if you'd let me take you both." A smile touched my lips. I looked at my daughter, playing happily on the sofa. I had been through the darkest of storms, but I had survived. I no longer feared the future. I picked up my phone and typed a simple reply. "Thank you, Michael. We would love that." I sent the message and scooped Anne into my arms. Together, we looked out at the vast, clear blue sky. A new day had dawned, brighter and more beautiful than ever before.